The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Melinda Gates often refers to long-acting reversible contraceptives, or LARCs, as a way to empower women of impoverished countries and give them more control over their lives. However, some of these LARCs have serious, irreversible adverse effects.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey, together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the largest private foundation on Earth, with a $53 billion endowment.
That's the way it is.
A lot has been reported on the foundation's influence over public health institutions in the areas of vaccines and the food system. But the foundation is also heavily involved in something else, making sure poor people have less children, or as they like to call it, family planning.
It really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial.
Last week, to those paying attention, it seemed like the foundation was taking a giant U-turn. A piece was published in Germany's Der Spiegel discussing forced and coerced sterilization in poor countries. The piece was very critical. Quote, "Sterilization is often only the best contraception method when circumstances make it so," the article reads. This is an uncontroversial statement, but it manufactures consent for better contraception. The article is a part of Der Spiegel's Global Societies Project, a quote, journalism initiative generously funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The online newspaper has so far received $5.5 million from the foundation, evidently to produce fancy Gates contraception propaganda. Just yesterday it was announced that the foundation would be leveling tens of millions of dollars to collaborate with drug giant Bayer to develop new forms of non-permanent sterilization and contraception for the quote, Global South. These two stories are just the most recent examples of the Gates Foundation pushing alternatives, profitable alternatives, to surgical, messy sterilization. Family planning has long been a central pillar of the foundation's behemoth grant-making network, and whether these alternatives are safer is up for debate. Melinda Gates often refers to long-acting reversible contraceptives, or LARCs, as a way to empower women of impoverished countries and give them more control over their lives. However, some of these LARCs have serious, irreversible adverse effects, and the wide-scale distribution of these products to young women without informed consent offers little self-determination. One example is the drug Norplant, a contraceptive implant manufactured by Sharing, now Bayer. Norplant can prevent pregnancy for up to 5 years, but sometimes longer. It was yanked from the US market in 2002 after more than 50,000 women filed lawsuits against the company and the doctors who prescribed it. 70 of those class action suits related to side effects like depression, extreme nausea, scalp hair loss, ovarian cysts, migraines, and excessive bleeding. A human development website called Degrees, which was funded by the Gates Foundation, alleges that Norplant never gained much traction globally because inserting it and removing it, quote, proved cumbersome, not because of these debilitating and grueling side effects. Rebranded as Jadel, the dangerous drug was promoted in Africa by the Gates Foundation in conjunction with Engender Health. Engender Health was originally named the Sterilization League for Human Betterment. Engender Health's original mission, inspired by the pseudoscience of eugenics, was to, quote, improve the biological stock of the human race. Predictably, Jadel is not approved by the FDA for use in the US. Then there's Pfizer's Depo-Provera, an injectable contraceptive used in several African and Asian countries. The Gates Foundation funded this drug's distribution and introduced it into the healthcare systems of countries including Uganda, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, Senegal, Bangladesh, and India. In 2012, Melinda Gates promised to supply contraceptives like Depo-Provera, which cost between $120 to $300 a year, to at least 120 million women by 2020. In 2017, Melinda Gates authored an article on Medium reporting that her and her partners were on track to keeping that promise and pledging another $375 million in additional funds to do so. That meant Pfizer made between $14 and $36 billion through this program. Disturbingly, Depo-Provera's active ingredient, DMPA, has been associated with side effects like life-threatening blood clots in the lungs, blindness, and breast cancer. But at least these women aren't getting pregnant. In 2015, 70 Indian feminist groups and scholars signed a statement protesting the regulatory approval of Depo-Provera in India, citing side effects like excessive bone density loss, weight gain, excessive bleeding, and depression. Their statement argued that women's organizations have consistently opposed the introduction of dangerous contraceptives like these, and that, quote, there are risks that the women are not given enough information about. Despite widespread domestic opposition and the mounting evidence of negative side effects, the Gates Foundation continues working to push drugs like Depo-Provera to women all over the globe. Last year, the Gates Foundation pledged another monstrous $3.1 billion to these family planning initiatives. But according to media reports, these projects might be getting more high-tech. According to the Washington Post, a remote-controlled contraceptive microchip implanted under the skin is the, quote, future of medicine. An MIT startup with the financial backing of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is developing a digital implant that releases birth control hormones automatically into the bloodstream for as long as 16 years. According to MIT Technology Review, the idea originated when Bill Gates visited Moderna co-founder Robert Langer's MIT lab in 2012 and asked him if it would be possible to create an implantable birth control device that could be turned on or off remotely. Langer referred Gates to the controlled release microchip technology that he had invented and licensed to a company called Microchips Biotechnology. The Gates Foundation then granted $20 million to the firm to develop the contraceptive digital implants. Technologies like these put reproductive rights of sovereign women in the hands of big tech. According to critics, the Gates Foundation sees population growth in poor countries backwards. Instead of understanding the rapid growth of their populations as a result of poor social, economic, and health conditions, the foundation prefers to see the issue as stemming from thin air, and says that controlling the amount of children women have is the solution to the poor societal issues. As scholar and researcher who focuses on the Gates Foundation, Jake Levitch put it in 2019, it is not overpopulation that causes poverty, but vice versa. Surely, Melinda Gates explained that she was worried that her work in providing healthcare to poor countries would result in more people. But thank goodness, she found out that wasn't the case.
And what the developing world does not need is more children.
And I think that was the biggest aha to Bill and me when we got into this work, is we asked ourselves, of course, the same hard-nosed question you'd ask, which is, if you get into this work and you start to save these children, will women just keep overpopulating the world? And thank goodness the converse is absolutely true.
Bill Gates has explained that the aim of his philanthropy work is to lower the population.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Of course, fact-checkers jumped to the defense of Gates as soon as his Freudian slip happened. But population control is an interest, if not a chief aim, of the foundation. For example, let's look at this meeting that took place in 2009.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey, together with others at the meeting, including George Soros, Ted Turner, David Rockefeller. It was like the Super Friends.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's 4 greatest heroes.
That much money, that much power around one table. It begs the question, what were they doing? What were they scheming? Total world domination?
This group, together for 6 hours, was talking about charity, education, emergency relief, global health, the new Superman and Wonder Woman, the super rich friends, not fighting bad guys, but fighting for good nonetheless. For Good Morning America, John Berman, ABC News.
As journalist James Corbett pointed out, this report is an utter failure. There was no attempt to question the participants about the meeting, no space for any criticism of these billionaires, or questions of their motives, no adversarial journalism of any kind. But as a PR piece, it was brilliant. It leaves the viewer with a vague sense that some kind of gathering took place somewhere in New York in which rich people, who, let's not forget, are superheroes, talked about charity. If you turn to print resources, you'll see what the meeting was really about. Mainstream media newspaper The Sunday Times pointed out that the meeting of Gates and Rockefeller and Bloomberg was to, quote, consider how their wealth could be used to slow the growth of the world's population. An investigation by the Columbia Journalism Review found that the Gates Foundation has given over $300 million to mainstream media and even so-called independent journalism. This control over the media has allowed Gates to do many things, including direct the narrative on population control, draping it in progressive language like reproductive health and women's rights, while at the same time creating billions in profits for the pharmaceutical industry.
You know, I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy, very proud of the work of the foundation.
For Rebel News, I'm Jeremy Lafredo. If you want to continue seeing the other side of the story, not the government narrative or the corporate media narrative, head to rebelnewsusa.com.